Did you know that your mindset can largely affect the outcome of a scenario? If you don't believe me, consider with me two scenarios that evaluate a father and son relationship. In the first scenario, the father views his son as very irresponsible. And so naturally, when this son, one Friday night, comes to ask his father if he can borrow the car, his father's pretty hesitant. He starts to think, I don't know if he'll do very good things. His friends, I don't know if I can really trust them. And so he wants to say no. However, he doesn't really have a good reason to say no. So he decides he'll just give him a curfew. That way he can't do anything stupid. So he tells his son, okay, if you are home by 10:30, then you can take the car. So of course his son is excited and takes the keys and is out the door. Now, instantly as his son leaves, his father's feeling like he doesn't know if his son will really be back on time. Again, he thinks that his son is pretty irresponsible and perhaps untrustworthy. And so as time goes on and the hours keep going down and getting closer to that 10:30 hour, his father feels more and more frustrated. He feels like his son just constantly is doing things that don't show that he can really handle himself. So just before it's the 10:30 time, his father decides he knows that his son isn't going to be home on time, and he starts to get furious. Now, just as his father decides this, here he hears some squealing tires down the road and hears a car pull into the driveway, and sure enough, right as his son walks in, it's 10:29. His son was on time. So, in this scenario, you would think that this father would be happy, right? His son was responsible. He came back at the time that he had specified. However, as his son walked in the door, his son said, "I made it." However, his father looked at him and said, "You sure cut it close, didn't you?" Now, there could have been a very different outcome in this scenario. Let's look at the second scenario with a father and son who come from fairly humble circumstances. This father and son, they live on a mountainside and they live right next to a cliff. And this family for many, many years had been driving this old truck. However, because the father is a hard worker, he'd managed to save up enough to go out and buy a new car, which he did. Of course, in this same week that this father buys this car, this son goes up to him and says, "Dad, I have a date tonight. Can I borrow the car?" Now, his father, considering his son's actions, says, "Son, you've always been responsible with the truck. Go ahead and take the car out tonight." So, son goes out, gets in the car, and he starts to pull away down the driveway. And as he's getting halfway down the driveway, he notices that the car is almost out of gas. So, he puts it in park, he stops, he goes back in the house, and he says, "Dad, can I get a few bucks for gas?" His dad says sure, gives him the money, and he goes back out to get in the car. However, to his horror, as he gets to the driveway, he can't find the car anywhere, and the fear starts to sink in. He starts to walk down the driveway and gets to the edge of the cliff, and sure enough, there at the bottom of the cliff is his dad's new car. Now, he's sitting there considering how he could possibly tell his dad that he just crashed his new car, and so he shyly makes his way into the house and somehow manages to tell his dad, "Dad, I crashed the car." Now you think in this scenario that his father would be furious. His son had been very irresponsible, and it was the opportunity to get frustrated. However, this father took a second in silence, looked at his son, and said, "Well, I guess you're just going to have to take the truck." Now, as we can see in both of these scenarios, both the fathers wanted their sons to be responsible. However, the fathers had very different mindsets. In one scenario, the father had a very inward mindset where he was looking for ways to justify his actions. And when we look to justify our actions, we need to view somebody else as an object, as a reason that we are upset. However, conversely, when we have an outward mindset, we look at others for who they are and the value that they can contribute. And we try to make the best of a situation. And it's because of the positivity that comes from this outward mindset that myself, as well as my peers Jason and McKay, would like to persuade everyone to develop an outward mindset, because it will ultimately lead to the best outcomes in every scenario. So in order to do this, we would like to first consider the process or the theory behind an inward mindset. What goes into an inward mindset? So that number 2, we can recognize what kind of a mindset we have and how we can choose to have that outward mindset. And then number 3, how that will ultimately allow us to see others for who they are and not as objects. So to start, we will consider 4 boxes or ways of thinking with an inward mindset.